You know, there are so many qualities to a good leader. First of all, you have to be willing to be wrong. And that includes being willing to listen to other people's ideas. The leaders that I have known who I have found really effective aren't the crazy, out there, super gregarious ones. They're the ones who may have a very definite idea of where they want to go or where they want their team to go, but they're also willing to hear other people's ideas, because no one person can be so rigid that they're forcing their ideas on other people's throats, and you don't get buy-in that way. So I found the best leaders tend to be really good salespeople and understand that they can get buy-in by being inclusive, as opposed to here's my way and that's the only way I'm going to do it. That's not a good leader. That's a dictator. Mm-hmm. So. There were several. First of which were probably not wanting to be poor and wanting to disprove other people's ideas of who they thought I should be. And let me give you some background on that, because I think that's important for anybody who's faced discrimination. But I can't tell you how many times people would say, you're Mexican, you don't look Mexican, as if there's a special Mexican look. And, just basically calling me a liar. And I know they didn't mean that, but that's that underlying, I don't fit their image of what a Mexican should look like. And I feel like saying, if you went to Mexico, you'd see that I look pretty much like half the population there. And then, secondly, they would be shocked that I spoke English as well as I do. And I would say things like, but I was born in Los Angeles, why wouldn't I speak English as well as you do? And I've heard, oh, but still. And then they were shocked that I went to college. And then I'd say, I went to UCLA. Oh, really? Well, that must, I'm sure that affirmative action really helped. So it's all those kinds of little comments that people don't realize they're being racist, but they are. And so I determined a long time ago to do whatever it took to prove them wrong. Because in many people's eyes, I should have been pregnant, a high school dropout, and pregnant. I should never have gone to college. I certainly shouldn't have gone to UCLA. I shouldn't have been on the dean's list. I shouldn't have learned French. I never should have gotten to where I am. But I am very stubborn, and the youngest of 6 kids, so you learn to fight back in very effective ways. No blood, no fists, but you just learn to maneuver around those things. And so disproving other people's ideas of who they think I should be is something that I have made as a mantra. Now that's an interesting question, because I think that kind of assumes that Latinos can't help themselves. So instead of, it gets to the point of how do we understand, first of all, you have to understand that the Latino community is not just one cohesive unit. And I know that because Latino is anywhere from the tip of South America to LA, Chicago, San Francisco, Dallas, Houston, any city in the country. I mean, the fact that California already has 50% Latinos there, is basically, I joke with my boyfriend, I say, oh, I want to go to Mexico for vacation. He goes, oh yeah, where do you want to go? I said, LA. Because it's such a Mexican environment. And yet, if you look at Miami, that's predominantly Cuban and Central American or Caribbean. And those cultures are very different from Mexican culture. Mm-hmm. So assuming that there's a big unity, that's crazy. So it takes understanding the cultural differences among those groups, because even linguistically, very different. The word coraje it means anger in one culture, and it means courage in another. So if you use them in the wrong context, you'll leave people confused. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So understanding that, I think, is the first key, that not all Latinos are the same, just like not all Italians are the same, or not all Americans are the same. And then ask yourself, what does the community need, and where can I help? without assuming that they need help.
Right.
You know, one of the things that I've known people who always want to help you, and it ends up making you feel like, what makes you think I need help?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you wait until I ask for it? So it's getting to, approaching the population. The first question is, do you need assistance? If they say no, there's a lot of pride with anybody. And to assume that somebody needs help is also to assume that they can be helpless. And nobody likes that assumption. Not all Latinos are poor. Not all Latinos are illiterate. Not all Latinos are poorly educated or have just come across the border, however they got there, whether it was legally or not. So it's those kinds of assumptions that lead to this much deeper, almost not insignificant, but an almost invisible prejudice that people don't even know they're saying. But it's those kinds of, so if you want to be a leader in the Latino community, you have to understand how those, what are called micro inequities, really affect a person, a family, a community. Because it's that kind of thing that wears you down and wears you down and wears you down and wears the people down and keeps them from wanting to ask for any assistance because they think, well, they're just going to think I'm another dumb Latino. You know, where it just could just be a cultural difference. So it's though, if you really want to help, understand that first. It can be. I mean, generally, I don't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
And most people probably feel that way. The problem with that is that, yes, we should speak up and say, that's really not cool. But let's say English were not my language, my maternal language, and it was my second language. Mm-hmm. And let's say I spoke with a heavy accent. If you try to explain this to somebody who says things like that, sometimes it falls on deaf ears because they can often say, well, they've got a chip on their shoulder. They're just too sensitive. They really should learn English. And so it can be difficult. I have I do now say things like, that's not working for me. You might want to rethink why you said that and educate them, but it can be really tiresome. So you really just want to go, forget it. Don't have time. I have a meeting to get to, kind of a thing. So yeah, it would be nice if everyone had time to say. And the other thing is that sometimes you don't realize what the micro inequity is. As the recipient of it. Sometimes it's 10 minutes later when you realize, wait a minute, what the heck is that all about? So it can be challenging, but you make a good point that the more we speak up and say, that kind of goes to an underlying prejudice that I'm sure you don't mean, but that hurts.
Right.
And that would probably help, but you'd end up spending a lot of time doing that. So one of the things I'm doing is being a role model, because I think that there aren't enough in people's everyday lives. So I am very proud to say I'm Mexican. And again, people still, every single time, somebody says, oh, you don't look Mexican. So now I just say, well, actually, I look like pretty much most Mexicans, I laugh at it now because I know that they don't mean to be insensitive. Mm-hmm. It's just their understanding. When they think of Mexicans, they see news footage of people coming across the border, and they tend to look darker skinned because maybe they've been out in the sun for a long time. They may have more Indian backgrounds in their heritage. I don't know, but they don't expect to see me. So the other thing I'm doing, especially at work, is since I got there, I've been a broken record. Anytime we're talking about a project or some printed materials, I'm the first one to go, is it in Spanish? Is it in Spanish? Is it in Spanish? I mean, I have been a broken record. But the good news is that there are changes happening internally, and we are now creating some teams to make sure that as a matter of course, as a company, we automatically reach out to the Latino population. And in my work specifically, I am charged with creating those relationships with those organizations like National Council of La Raza, who I've been working with since I got here. And I'm actually really proud to say that this year, in July, we as a company participated at their annual conference for the first time ever. I haven't noticed any here. And to be fair, I mean, I go to work, I go home, I go to work, I go home, because that seems like the only time I have. I have noticed it in other places many times, against my mom, against my dad, you know, and they came from Mexico. They both spoke wonderful English. I mean, we'd watch Jeopardy and my mom knew all the answers. We'd play crossword and she'd mop the floor with us. I mean, because she knew her Latin roots, her Greek roots. You know, she'd look at us and go, "What's the matter with you kids? Don't they teach you anything?" She spoke with an accent, but she had an amazing vocabulary. And so I would see people, as she was talking, they would kind of turn off their ears to what she was saying because they couldn't get past her accent. And that's another micro inequity. So I would often say, turn on your foreign language ears. Because if you start just opening up that possibility, you start understanding people no matter what language they originally speak, you begin to kind of understand the accent, and therefore you can understand the English words behind that accent. So again, I haven't noticed it too much here, but there's no lack of it, I'm sure, in any community. I agree with you. I mean, I think the sad thing is in our family that my parents chose to speak English to us, so I did not grow up speaking very good Spanish. It was they never corrected me. My grandmother never corrected my grammar, so she did me a disservice. You know, the upside is that no one could accuse us of being illiterate. You know, so that was the struggle that was a choice my parents had to face at that time. It was a different time. Yeah. I mean, my parents would say that when my oldest sister was in first grade, a nun hit her because she didn't know English yet, or enough. Whatever the lady's problem was, clearly went beyond things that my parents could control. But that was when they decided, okay, no, we are not putting our kids through this kind of discrimination, because that was a time when it just was not cool to be Hispanic of any origin. If our educational system had a greater will to teach different languages, we would immediately start to see the prejudice diminish, because it wouldn't be something foreign. It would be part of them. You know, whatever language you speak, that's part of your culture too. But yeah, that's I think a battle that most immigrants from whatever country they're facing. And yet I still hold, this is my own little idea, no data to back it up whatsoever, but I think that people who come to this country already have an American mindset, because it takes a lot of guts to leave your home. Good question. I think that Connecticut is further behind. I mean, LA, we've got a Latino mayor. Miami, it's mostly Latino. Connecticut is still in that new wave of immigrants, and they're from so many places. So they're from Brazil, they're from Central America, so name all 7 Central American countries. You know, Hondurans, Guatemalans, so you've got a very new wave, and I don't think that they have yet found their political structure. There may not be enough of them there. There's going to have to be a lot more before there's any political organization among them. And that's where, you know, it'll happen, because, and this isn't meant to sound insensitive, but it's going to happen through birth rates. Just like how in California, over 50% of the population is either directly an immigrant or of Hispanic heritage. So, for instance, in our family, I have 1 brother and 4 sisters, and they all married non-Latinos, but their kids are still considered of Latino heritage. So, because Latinos tend to intermarry a lot with Anglo people, you're going to have that kind of of stability and stabilization and probably broadening of the Latino culture here in Connecticut. But it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't noticed, I haven't seen any street signs in Spanish. So it takes a lot more people to get to any one particular area and have a few generations established before you start getting those political structures in place. I don't know if you guys ever go to Amigo's Deli, not far from here, but we stopped in there after voting on the 6th of November, and I don't know what country the guy who owns it is from, but he was so excited. We asked him, "Did you vote?" And he goes, "No, I can't yet, but I go for my citizenship next week, and I'll vote in the next election." And it was so heartwarming, and I was like, "Yes, good for you." So it's going to take that mobilization of getting people enfranchised instead of assuming that they're going to be disenfranchised forever, but helping them get enfranchised. And you asked earlier, what can you do as students? Get that community involved in the political structure, because that's the only way that we'll see more equity. I was in Miami a few weeks ago at part of this whole new cross-cultural marketing at work. We got some of the marketing teams to go down to Miami and basically do a field trip and go around the city to look at how different pockets of Latino culture, but from different perspectives, live on a daily basis. And they gave a background to the non-Latinos of the group, which was everybody else. Some of the underlying, how do you even put it? Some of the underlying essence of what it is to be Latino. And I didn't realize how Mexican I really am. So, for instance, there is a way of viewing the world that was explained by this brilliant woman. Her name is Rosanna Fisk. She was explaining that there's this duality in our thinking, spiritualism combined with fatalism. And it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but I heard that and I had to laugh, because when I remember in high school, my mom said, well, expect the best, but prepare for the worst. And so it's phrases like that you realize, oh yeah, it is in everything I do. So it's things like that that you realize how deeply ingrained culture is, and that it is much more than, celebrating Dia de los Muertos, or, making buñuelos every Christmas, which I do from land every Christmas, because those are the kinds of things that really, food, of course, I think in any culture always brings you back to your roots. And so those are things that I don't ever want to lose. Right before Thanksgiving, I get a phone call. And now I live in Danbury, and I get this phone call on my cell phone. I'm thinking, that's odd, a number I did not recognize. I pick it up, and he says, "Hi, ma'am, this is a so-and-so from Home Depot, and your number was given to us because we heard that you might need some help this holiday." I'm like, well, we have electricity from the storm. That's not an issue. I'm thinking, what help would I need? And it turns out it was a food bank, and he was offering food. And I, well, nice of you to offer, but I got it covered. And I couldn't help thinking, where did he get my number from? So maybe it was somebody going through the phone list and they saw a Latin name, a Hispanic surname, and just kind of assumed that, of course, I would need food for me and my family. And I'm not insulted by it, but it's that kind of assumption that is ineffective, because he wasted a phone call on somebody who may have no need. I mean, I'm very fortunate that we don't need any food assistance or financial assistance, but I'm thinking, how did they get there? Just by assuming that because my name is a Spanish surname that I must need help? Another instance, when I was getting divorced years ago, I was married to a man with an English surname. And I was sailing with some friends, old friend of my dad's. The man was like a gazillionaire and had this beautiful yacht that we would sail out of the marina in Los Angeles. And he and his friends knew that I was getting a divorce, and they said, well, are you going to keep your married name? And I said, no. I said, why would I? We don't have kids, and there's no reason for me to. And these were very supportive, liberal people. But you know what they said to me? They said, wow, I would recommend that you keep it. And I said, why? And they said, well, because you'll be more accepted that way. And that was another thing, that getting back to the what has led me to be such a pain in the rear, comments like that. Mm-hmm. That I would do better as a career woman hanging on to an English surname as opposed to my family name. I can't even tell you how insulting that is. So I'm thinking that's how deep prejudice goes, that people don't even realize it. And this was a group he used to counsel the state Democratic Party in California. I mean, he touted himself as like this really liberal guy. And I'm thinking, wow, not so much. So it's those kinds of things that people don't realize how deep prejudice goes. I was teaching a class to some healthcare providers in Sacramento several years ago, and they came to me saying, we're having trouble with our Spanish-speaking patients. You know, their complaint was that the Spanish speakers were always late for their appointments. Like, okay, fair enough. First of all, do away with the appointment structure, and nobody will be late. And that sounds crazy. But time is viewed differently in different cultures. I said, first of all, let's understand that there is a different perception of time. And then I said, now imagine that you go to a foreign country. I said, did anybody speak Romanian? Nobody spoke Romanian. I was like, great. You go to Romania because you hear that you can get a job and you can put food on the table and clothes on the backs of your family and a roof over everybody's head. And suddenly you get really sick. And you might not have been highly educated in your own language, but now you have to go to a doctor who speaks a different language and who's using terms that you wouldn't have understood in your own language. All you can get is that you're really, really sick. How well do you think you will cope with that? And you have kids to get out the door in the morning to get to school because you want them to be educated so that they have a better life, and your job doesn't give you time off from work. Mm-hmm. And you miss that bus by 2 minutes. That's going to make you late for the next appointment. Do you think that they're really going to come in here expecting to be tossed out? Can you have a little compassion for that person? You know, can you see yourself in that? How well do you think you're going to do? And they all just kind of go, oh yeah, maybe I wouldn't do so well in a foreign culture. Mm-hmm. When I have all these other pressures on me, and you're the head of the family, you and your spouse, if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. If not, it's just you. So, you know, let's put a different look at this and see what can be done with your system that accommodates those kinds of stresses. I know one physician who understood that, and he did away with appointments. He let people call the day before to come in the next day, morning or afternoon, that was it. Oh, wow. They saw more patients, less stress for the staff, less stress for the patients. Everybody got what they needed because now there's an understanding of a system that works with their worldview.